Imagine a world where money, the very lifeblood of any economy, is controlled by a handful of powerful men. A world where these bankers, not elected officials, hold the reins to the nation's purse strings. This was the United States in the mid-19th century, a time when the national banking system held sway and sowed the seeds of financial inequality that would ultimately lead to the assassination of a president. The national banking system was established in 1863 during the throes of the American Civil War as a means to finance the Union's war efforts. The system, orchestrated by a cabal of influential bankers, created a network of national banks that would issue a uniform currency, the national banknote backed by U.S. government bonds. On paper, this new banking system seemed like a boon for the nation's financial stability, but in practice, it fell short of its lofty promises. The national banknotes were only issued in limited quantities, and the banks had to hold substantial reserves of government bonds as collateral. This meant that there was never enough currency in circulation to meet the growing demands of a rapidly industrializing country. Moreover, the national banks reaped enormous profits from this arrangement, while ordinary citizens and small businesses suffered under the yoke of artificially constrained credit. As the divide between the haves and have-nots grew ever wider, the stage was set for a confrontation that would alter the course of American history. This is the story of Lincoln's Greenbacks, the currency that dared to challenge the stranglehold of the national banking system. This bold financial experiment sought to break the bankers' grip on the nation's money supply and return economic power to the people. But as we shall see, this revolutionary idea would ultimately cost the life of a president and leave an indelible mark on our nation's financial history. Join us as we embark on an investigative journey into Lincoln's Greenbacks, the currency that got a president killed, exploring the shadowy world of 19th century finance, political intrigue, and the fateful decisions that forever altered the course of American history. So sit back, buckle up, and prepare to unravel the money conspiracy. As the American Civil War raged on, President Abraham Lincoln faced an unprecedented financial crisis. The Union government was desperately in need of funds to finance the war effort, but the traditional sources of revenue were proving insufficient. Inflation was spiraling out of control, and the banks, controlled by a powerful group of industrialists and financiers, had limited the credit supply. In this desperate hour, Lincoln made a fateful decision that would leave an indelible mark on our nation's financial history. He issued greenbacks as an alternative currency. On February 25, 1862, the Legal Tender Act became law, authorizing the U.S. Treasury to print and circulate some $450 million in paper money that was not backed by gold or silver reserves, a move unheard of at the time. These new notes, known as greenbacks due to their distinctive green ink, were legal tender for all public debts and could be used to pay taxes. The greenbacks helped keep the Union's war machine running, but they also represented a direct challenge to the established financial order. The bankers, who had previously held a monopoly on money creation through their control of gold and silver reserves, saw their power threatened by Lincoln's greenbacks. They waged a relentless campaign against this new currency, both in the press and behind closed doors, painting it as an irresponsible measure that would inevitably lead to hyperinflation. Despite these objections, the greenbacks proved crucial in financing the Union victory, with over $1.3 billion issued by the end of the war. But the controversy surrounding them did not end there. The bankers' influence ensured that subsequent administrations reined in the use of this alternative currency and returned to a gold-backed standard. The question remains, was Lincoln's decision to issue greenbacks a necessary measure to save the Union, or did it ultimately contribute to his untimely demise? As we continue our investigation into Lincoln's greenbacks, the currency that got a president killed, join us as we delve deeper into the shadowy world of 19th century finance and political intrigue that forever altered the course of American history. In the midst of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln faced an unprecedented financial challenge. The Union needed funds to finance the war effort, but the traditional sources, such as borrowing from banks or selling bonds, were inadequate. To meet this challenge, Lincoln and his administration took a bold step. They decided to print paper money backed by the credit of the United States government, not by gold or silver. This new currency was called greenbacks, named after the green ink used to print them. The benefits of greenbacks were significant for both the general public and the government. For the average citizen, greenbacks provided much-needed liquidity during a time of economic uncertainty. They could be used to buy goods and services, just like gold or silver coins. Moreover, the interest rates on greenbacks were lower than those on borrowed money, making them an attractive alternative for individuals and businesses. For the government, greenbacks offered a way to raise funds quickly and efficiently without relying on wealthy bankers or foreign investors. The government could print as many greenbacks as it needed, effectively increasing the money supply and stimulating economic activity. This was a radical departure from the traditional gold standard, which limited the amount of money in circulation based on the available gold reserves. But the power to print money came with risks. Some critics argued that greenbacks were inherently inflationary, as they increased the money supply without a corresponding increase in goods and services. Others worried about the potential for abuse, as the government could effectively print money to pay off its debts or finance pet projects. Despite these concerns, greenbacks remained a popular and effective way to finance the war effort. By the end of the Civil War, the Union had printed over 450 million in greenbacks, accounting for about one-third of all government spending during the conflict. But the legacy of greenbacks would extend beyond the war. The idea of a flexible currency backed by the credit of the government, rather than by precious metals, would continue to influence economic policy in the United States and around the world. And while the debate over the merits and risks of greenbacks would continue, there was no denying their impact on the course of American history. As we continue our investigation into Lincoln's greenbacks, the currency that got a president killed, it's clear that this innovative financial instrument played a crucial role in funding the Union's war effort and shaping the nation's economic destiny. But did Lincoln's decision to issue greenbacks ultimately contribute to his untimely demise? That remains a question for further exploration as we delve deeper into the shadowy world of 19th century finance and political intrigue. As we continue our investigation into Lincoln's greenbacks, it's crucial to examine the formidable opposition this unconventional currency faced from powerful bankers and wealthy elites. These influential adversaries saw their financial dominance threatened by the president's decision to issue a new form of paper money not backed by gold or silver. At the heart of the resistance was the banking establishment, which held a virtual monopoly on America's money supply through the issuance of banknotes. The most influential of these institutions was the Bank of New York, whose president, James McDougal, vehemently opposed greenbacks. In an 1865 speech before the New York State Legislature, McDougal warned that the issue of paper money is a power as dangerous to liberty as tyranny itself. But why did bankers fear greenbacks so much? Quite simply, they threatened their ability to control interest rates and manipulate the economy. By printing its own money, the federal government could bypass the need for loans from private banks, thereby reducing their power and influence. Moreover, greenbacks allowed the Union to finance its war effort without incurring crippling debts to wealthy creditors. Wealthy elites also joined the chorus of opposition. They saw greenbacks as an affront to their privileged status and a dangerous step towards democratic control over the economy. In particular, railroad magnates like Jay Gould and Cornelius Vanderbilt feared that inflationary pressures from greenbacks would erode their fortunes. The banking lobby left no stone unturned in its efforts to undermine greenbacks. They spent lavishly on political campaigns, disseminated propaganda through sympathetic newspapers, and even resorted to bribery. One notorious example occurred when House Ways and Means Chairman Elbert Spalding received a $100,000 bribe from bankers to oppose greenbacks. Despite these efforts, Lincoln remained steadfast in his support for the currency, recognizing its potential to democratize finance and empower ordinary Americans. Yet just months after his re-election in 1864, he was assassinated, an event that some historians suggest may have been connected to his unwavering stance on greenbacks. As we'll explore in the next segment, the struggle over greenbacks didn't end with Lincoln's death. The currency would continue to divide the nation and fuel political tensions for decades to come. The notion that Lincoln's stance on greenbacks might have cost him his life is not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, the president's unwavering commitment to this unique form of currency had made him powerful enemies among the country's financial elite. Just months before the assassination, a group of influential bankers and financiers had met in secret to discuss their growing concern over Lincoln's greenback policy. The meeting took place at the prestigious New York City Club, the House of Knickerbocker, on January 23, 1865. Among those present were former Treasury Secretary James Guthrie, prominent banker August Belmont, and railroad tycoon John Astor. The minutes from this secret meeting reveal a plan to form a new national bank that would have the power to issue its own currency, effectively undermining Lincoln's greenback policy. But there was another, more sinister aspect to their plot. The bankers discussed the possibility of a coup d'etat against the president if he refused to abandon his support for greenbacks. It's important to note that there is no direct evidence linking this meeting to Lincoln's assassination. But it's clear that the financial elite saw Lincoln as a threat to their power and were willing to consider drastic measures to stop him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the debate, ordinary Americans had come to see greenbacks as a symbol of hope and empowerment. The currency had helped to finance the Union war effort, stimulate economic growth, and give ordinary people a greater stake in the country's prosperity. But for the bankers and financiers who had long controlled the nation's money supply, greenbacks represented a direct challenge to their power and privilege. And as we'll see in the next segment, this struggle over currency would continue to divide the nation and fuel political tensions for decades to come. So while the exact role that greenbacks played in Lincoln's assassination may never be fully known, there is no doubt that the currency was a flashpoint in a larger conflict. A conflict between the powerful financial interests who had long controlled the nation's money supply and the ordinary Americans who saw in greenbacks a chance to build a more inclusive and equitable economy. As the Civil War raged on, President Lincoln faced increasing pressure from powerful financial interests. These groups, primarily comprised of bankers and wealthy industrialists, saw greenbacks as a threat to their dominance over the nation's money supply. In response, they lobbied tirelessly for legislation that would limit the use and circulation of this revolutionary currency. Their efforts culminated in the National Currency Acts of 1863 and 1864, also known as the National Banking Acts. These laws created a new system of national banks, which were required to purchase government bonds to secure their ability to issue banknotes. The acts also established a uniform national currency, effectively diminishing the role of greenbacks in the economy. The National Currency Acts had several significant consequences. First, they increased the cost of borrowing for both the federal government and ordinary Americans. The requirement for banks to purchase government bonds drove up interest rates, making it more expensive for the government to finance the war effort and for individuals to obtain loans for businesses and farms. Second, the acts concentrated financial power in the hands of a few large banks, primarily located in the Northeast. These banks gained significant influence over the money supply, as they were now responsible for issuing much of the nation's currency. This consolidation of power further marginalized the ordinary Americans who had embraced greenbacks as an alternative to the traditional banking system. Finally, the National Currency Acts marked a significant shift in the role of the federal government in regulating the economy. By establishing a uniform national currency and creating a system of national banks, the federal government asserted its authority over monetary policy, setting the stage for future debates about the proper balance between state and federal power. The National Currency Acts were just one piece of a larger puzzle that helps explain the role of greenbacks in Lincoln's assassination. While it is impossible to know for certain what motivated John Wilkes Booth and his conspirators, there is no doubt that the currency was a flashpoint in a broader conflict between powerful financial interests and ordinary Americans. As we continue to explore the hidden history of our financial system, it is essential to remember the profound impact that policies like the National Currency Acts can have on the lives of everyday people. The assassination of President Abraham Lincoln sent shockwaves through the nation, but its long-term impact on the future of American currency is often overlooked. Lincoln's greenbacks, a form of paper money issued directly by the U.S. Treasury during the Civil War, were controversial and faced fierce opposition from powerful financial interests. Following Lincoln's death, his successor, Andrew Johnson, reversed many of his policies, including those related to the greenbacks. In 1866, Congress passed the Contraction Act, which effectively reduced the money supply by retiring one-third of the greenbacks in circulation. This move was a boon for banks and other financial institutions, but it had dire consequences for ordinary Americans, particularly farmers and small business owners who struggled with debt and inflation. The national banking system, established during Lincoln's presidency, further consolidated power in the hands of big banks. The system required national banks to hold government bonds as collateral for their notes, effectively tying the money supply to the fortunes of Wall Street. This arrangement created a vicious cycle where economic downturns led to bank failures and further contraction of the money supply, making recovery even more difficult. The Panic of 1873, also known as the Great Depression of the Gilded Age, illustrated the dangers of this system. The failure of a major railroad company sparked a nationwide financial crisis, leading to widespread bank failures and unemployment. Once again, ordinary Americans bore the brunt of the pain, while financiers and industrialists emerged relatively unscathed. The Populist Party, formed in response to these economic hardships, advocated for monetary reform as a means of empowering the working class. They proposed measures such as expanding the use of greenbacks, establishing a sub-treasury system to provide low-interest loans to farmers, and implementing a graduated income tax. Despite their efforts, populist candidates failed to gain traction in national politics. The financial establishment, led by Wall Street bankers and industrialists, maintained its grip on power, effectively squashing any meaningful monetary reform. The Federal Reserve System, established in 1913, further consolidated the power of big banks, creating a centralized institution responsible for managing the nation's money supply. Today, the legacy of Lincoln's assassination and its impact on American currency serves as a stark reminder of the enduring influence of financial interests in shaping our economic policies. As we continue to grapple with issues like income inequality, debt, and financial instability, it is essential that we remain vigilant against the concentration of power in the hands of the few and advocate for a more equitable and just financial system for all. In the shadows of Lincoln's assassination lies a lesser-known conspiracy, one involving the financial elite and their influence on money policies. The greenback, a type of paper currency issued by the United States government during the Civil War, was at the heart of this controversy. President Abraham Lincoln, in an effort to finance the Union's war efforts, authorized the printing of these notes directly by the Treasury Department. This move allowed the government to avoid borrowing from banks, which would have required them to pay exorbitant interest rates. The greenbacks were a direct challenge to the powerful banking institutions, and they didn't take kindly to it. After Lincoln's assassination, his successor, Andrew Johnson, faced immense pressure from the financial elite. They demanded the withdrawal of greenbacks from circulation, forcing the government to repay its debt with interest. This shift marked a significant turning point in American monetary policy, the beginning of the gold standard and the influence of private banking interests on our currency. The consequences of this power shift were profound. The money supply became constrained, leading to economic depressions and exacerbating income inequality. The financial elite benefited from this system, while ordinary Americans struggled under its burdens. Today, we see similar patterns emerging in our economy. Powerful financial interests continue to wield significant influence over monetary policies, shaping a system that benefits the few at the expense of the many. Consider the 2008 financial crisis, a disaster triggered by reckless banking practices and fueled by lax regulations. The fallout was felt across the globe, yet those responsible were bailed out with taxpayer dollars, further concentrating wealth and power. As we reflect on Lincoln's greenbacks and the enduring influence of financial interests, let us remember that history serves as a guide for our present and future actions. We must remain vigilant, advocating for transparency, accountability, and an equitable financial system that works for all Americans, not just the privileged few. In the end, it is up to us to demand change, challenge entrenched power structures, and ensure a more stable, fair, and inclusive economy for generations to come.